This is the image that inspired the infamous Jumpman logo. What many people don't know, in this picture, Michael Jordan is not wearing Nike, but New Balance. A few months later, he signed with Nike. The rest is history. Together they built the most dominant athlete brand ever. And today, Jordan brand is Nike's crown jewel, making over $7 billion a year. New Balance, however, they went in the opposite direction. While Nike and Adidas turned athletes into icons, New Balance focused on functionality. Their slogan, endorsed by no one and almost bought by no one. They became the go-to shoe for dads who cared more about arch support than sneaker drops.
Shoes made for running.
But worn by chubby white guys in their late 30s to early 40s.
But fast forward to today, and New Balance is the fastest growing sneaker brand in the game. They've gone from suburban lawn mowing essentials to high fashion must-haves. From endorsed by no one to signing world-class athletes. They even start to crack football. But this didn't happen by accident. They followed a playbook unlike any other brand in the sneaker industry, with a super interesting formula. Welcome to Athletic Interest and the business of New Balance. New Balance's story started with chickens. Yes, chickens. In 1906, William J. Riley, a British immigrant in Boston, wanted to design shoes that actually fit well. His inspiration? The chickens roaming in his backyard. He noticed how their three-pronged feet gave them perfect balance. So he took that idea and created an arch support system with 3 contact points, just like a chicken's foot. That's how New Balance got its name. But Riley wasn't selling sneakers. At first, his company made custom arch supports, and they weren't cheap. $5 a pair, which, adjusted for inflation, is nearly $90 today. His first customers? Policemen and firefighters. People who spent all day on their feet and needed comfort. It wasn't until the 1930s that New Balance made its first actual sneaker. And even then, it wasn't mass-produced. The shoes were custom-made for runners and athletes who wanted something functional rather than fashionable. Fast forward to 1960, and New Balance released the Trackster, the world's first running shoe available in different widths. A game changer. It had a wavy, grippy sole and quickly became popular with runners. And yet, while Nike and Adidas were busy signing athletes and pushing out bold designs, New Balance stayed a bit different. And small. Even when Jim Davis bought the company in 1972, on the day of the Boston Marathon, it was still a tiny operation. Just 6 employees, making less than 30 shoes per day. But Davis had a vision. Quality over quantity. No flashy ads, no big-name endorsements, just really well-made shoes. This philosophy led to some wild decisions. In 1982, New Balance dropped this model with a then unheard-of price tag. $100, equivalent to over $300 today. It was a statement. If you want the best running shoe, you pay for it. And it worked. At least kind of. New Balance built a loyal following. Not with hype, but with function. They weren't cool, but they were trusted. But sticking to function over fashion has a price. By the late 80s and 90s, while Nike and Adidas became cultural icons, New Balance was getting a very different reputation. Not with sneakerheads, not with basketball fans, but with dads. The most famous New Balance dad of all time? Probably this guy. While Nike had Jordan and Adidas had Run DMC, New Balance had Steve Jobs. For over a decade, the Apple co-founder walked on stage to introduce the latest Apple innovations. And on his feet, always the same shoes. Jobs wasn't a fashion icon, but he was the face of innovation. And his uniform, black turtleneck, jeans and New Balance sneakers became the tech world's equivalent of a suit and tie. Some even say Jobs helped design the 992 model. Whether that's true or not, his obsession with simplicity, functionality and quality made New Balance a good fit. But for decades, this wasn't cool. Until something changed. You could even see it on Google Trends. In 2018, searches for dad shoes were surging. So what happened? In 2017, Balenciaga released the Triple S, a chunky, oversized sneaker that looked straight out of a thrift store. It was bulky, it was exaggerated, and it cost $1,000. And somehow it became the must-have sneaker of the year. Suddenly sneaker culture, which had spent years obsessed with sleek, performance-driven designs, was embracing something new. Big, comfortable, and kind of ugly cool sneakers. And New Balance, they had been making those for decades. Unlike Balenciaga, they didn't need to invent a trend. They already had the shoes that fit perfectly into this new dad shoe aesthetic. So why did Gen Z, arguably a very fashion-conscious generation, embrace a sneaker their parents had been wearing for years? A few key things were happening. First, Gen Z was driving a resurgence of 90s nostalgia. Vintage aesthetics were back, and with them, a love for retro sneakers. Second, the sneaker resale market had made traditional hype shoes like Jordans, Yeezys, Off-Whites nearly impossible to buy at retail prices. People started looking for alternatives that were still stylish but more accessible. And third, comfort was winning. The rise of athleisure, remote work, and everyday casual wear meant that stiff, narrow sneakers were out. Chunky, well-cushioned shoes were in. New Balance didn't just benefit from this shift, they owned it. By staying true to their DNA, quality, comfort, and a timeless aesthetic, they turned their once-ignored sneakers into fashion statements. But this wasn't luck. New Balance engineered their comeback, and at the center of it was this man. Fashion trends are temporary. If you want long-term success, you need more than just one lucky sneaker cycle. You need strategy. And that's where Chris Davis comes in, son of the owner, Jim Davis. But Chris didn't get a free ride to the top. He started at New Balance in 2008, worked his way up, and officially joined the leadership team in 2016. By 2020, he was named Chief Marketing Officer, and he had a plan that would change the company. For years, New Balance relied on direct response advertising, a strategy focused on short-term sales. Think banner ads, product promos, and discount-driven campaigns. This approach worked for selling shoes. But it didn't build a brand. Nike and Adidas weren't winning because they had better sneakers. They were winning because they built cultural influence. Davis knew New Balance needed a brand-first strategy. So he flipped the marketing playbook and introduced a 50-30-20 formula. 50% on proven tactics, the foundation. For example, keeping strong retail partnerships and making sure New Balance products were accessible in key locations. 30% on calculated risks, ideas that worked in other industries but weren't mainstream in sneakers yet. For example, expanding into gaming and esports. And 20% on experimental projects. High risk, high reward moves. For example, opening a pub in London where runners could trade Strava miles for beer. A huge success in brand engagement. But marketing wasn't the only play. Davis knew that to build cultural relevance, New Balance needed credibility. And that meant collaborations. Hand-picked ones. For example, with Aimé Leon Dore. This was a turning point. Teddy Santis, the founder of Aimé Leon Dore, brought a retro, understated aesthetic that aligned perfectly with New Balance's heritage. Suddenly, New Balance wasn't just a sneaker brand. It was a brand people wanted to associate with. Every collab reinforced the idea that New Balance wasn't following trends. It was building its own lane. And it paid off. New Balance's revenue skyrocketed. But to truly compete with the biggest players in the industry, lifestyle collabs are not enough. If New Balance wants to cement its position, there is only one place left to conquer: sports. Because sports and the athletes who play it are at the heart of every serious performance-driven sports brand. Just like New Balance had to fight for a place in sports, navigating the internet isn't always as open as you'd expect. Ever tried watching a match that's geo-blocked in your country? That's where Proton VPN comes in. Proton was founded by scientists at CERN. You know, the place with a giant underground particle collider where they smash atoms to unlock the secrets of the universe. Basically, those guys wanted to build a better internet, where you control your data, not big tech. So they started with Proton Mail, the world's largest encrypted email service. Since then, they've expanded into a full privacy ecosystem, and that includes Proton VPN. With over 10,000 servers in more than 110 countries, so you can stream your favorite games and shows from anywhere. Blazing speed of up to 10 gigabytes per second with VPN Accelerator, boosting speed by up to 400%. And also thanks to the strict Swiss privacy laws, your personal data is protected with end-to-end encryption. Even the inventor of the World Wide Web, Sir Tim Berners-Lee, is on their board. So if you want to protect your privacy or never miss a football match again, check out Proton VPN at protonvpn.com/athleticinterest and get 64% off. Thanks a lot for supporting us. Nike and Adidas play the numbers game. They sign hundreds of athletes, focusing on volume and visibility. New Balance took a different route. They call it the inch-wide, mile-deep approach. Instead of signing a lot of athletes, they selectively partnered with athletes who fit the brand's DNA. Players who weren't just the best, but also represented what's next. And it started with one of the biggest names in basketball. For decades, New Balance had zero presence in the NBA. That changed in 2019, when they signed Kawhi Leonard, one of the league's most dominant and enigmatic superstars. It was a calculated risk. Unlike flashy, media-driven stars like LeBron or Steph Curry, Kawhi was known for his quiet, no-nonsense attitude.
I'm a fun guy. Obviously, I love the game of basketball.
And it paid off immediately. That same year, Kawhi led the Toronto Raptors to their first ever NBA championship and won Finals MVP. Just like that, New Balance wasn't just in the basketball world, they were winning titles. But basketball was just the beginning. New Balance doubled down on authentic, game-changing athletes. Shohei Ohtani, Coco Gauff, Sidney McLaughlin-Levrone, Cameron Brink. Every athlete they signed wasn't just a star. They were transformative figures in their sport. But the hardest sport to crack in sports marketing is probably football. New Balance's entry into the game was unconventional. They made first headlines by sponsoring the prime club Liverpool FC, even winning a Champions League title. But soon after, lost the club to Nike. Some of you might remember, this was actually the first video on Athletic Interest. After this not-so-great experience with the kit sponsorship, New Balance focused on selected players. Bukayo Saka, Andrick, Timothy Ware, Jordan Huitema, Jeremy Frimpong. What might be even more interesting than the player selection is their approach to market them. It starts with the genuine truth that each athlete is uniquely different. This also affects product development, for example the Speed Control Stud, an extra stud on their new Furon V8 boot to help players stop. It was designed using Saka's in-game data, which showed how he accelerates towards a defender, stoods to stand them up, then explodes past them with pace. And so did New Balance's revenue. Thanks to a lot of smart decisions in a row, selecting the right athletes, crafting the right partnerships, and innovating in ways that feel authentic to their brand. Nike and Adidas are still light years ahead in terms of sheer market share. But the trajectory is clear. There seems to be a New Balance in the battle of the brands.